Thanks for coming out, guys. My name is Genevieve, and this is Mercedes. We conducted our independent studies in Busua, and we looked at the mutual gaze, so how Busua women and female tourists perceive each other.
So, Busua has two main community centers separated by a strip of accommodation, essentially buildings, chop bars, which are actually like restaurants. And essentially on the beach side, you find a bunch of men and tourists working. The men are working in the tourism industry and in chop bars. And then on the other side, there will be a bunch of women working in stores along with their families. And in town, there's also a market, school, and a church. And then for these images, you can see here, like, these buildings would be the same strip. And then on one side is the beach where you see the men there recreating. Which the women often don't have time to do. And then this one here, you can see all of the people gathering, socializing, and of course, trying to sell things and make a living.
What I wanted to point out is the beach is very much a tourist zone, whereas the street is more community-oriented, where tourists are definitely invited and they definitely go there to eat and to have a few drinks and to shop. But there's definitely that separation between that line of accommodation, where the beach is tourist zone definitely, and then the road is kind of this community tourist overlapping zone. So our study, the purpose of the study is to explore the mutual gaze between the local women of Busua, Ghana, and who work in tourism and female tourists. So a little bit of literature review. Since we focused on the theoretical framework of the mutual gaze, I just wanted to describe that a little bit for you guys so you understand. The mutual gaze is a concept that originally started from the tourist gaze, which was just one perspective of how tourists saw their surroundings in a destination, which will be probably explained a little bit later in our presentation. And then there's the host gaze as well. So combining the two, you get the mutual gaze, which is both the host and the visitor's perceptions of each other. Moaz and Yuri also expanded that a little bit more, and they explained that it's not just this kind of one-dimensional view of how they see each other, it's deeper than that. So you're bringing in behaviors, attitudes, and interior and exterior variables there. So what media portrays certain areas to be like, movies, those kind of things. So that's all kind of in the mix of the mutual gaze. It goes a little bit more in depth, but for the purpose of this presentation, that's as far as I'm going to go.
So the methods that we used were, we began with one day of observation. We went around to the beaches and the community and sort of just observed the interactions that female tourists had with local women in the industry. And then we followed that with 3 days of semi-structured interviews, totaling 8 interviews with 4 local women and 4 international tourists. We found that semi-structured interviews were the best way to gather qualitative information regarding interactions and perceptions between the two groups. Local women, just to get an idea of who these people are, local women were generally in their early 20s to mid-40s. We interviewed 3 shop owners and 1 member of the local tourism board, and they have all interacted and are familiar with tourists. And then the female tourists were predominantly educated young European women in their 20s to early 30s, and they were generally visiting for educational and volunteer purposes. So we had 3 main emerging themes within our results: behaviors, attitudes, and cultural customs. And I'll begin with behaviors and attitudes, and then Jen will talk to you a little bit about the cultural customs. So although female tourists simply found it easier to befriend young men as opposed to women, it was perceived by the local women that female tourists were here to meet young men and to engage in hedonistic behaviors. Local women, and this is a quote, they often see young females chasing young men and they stay up late together. So that could be with nightlife or just walking around at night, but together. And there's definitely the perception that females are looking to be promiscuous. And then most interactions between female tourists and local women were very surface level. And although both groups definitely noticed this, the local women were a little bit more seeing as that was a negative experience. And for attitudes, this is sort of the biggest one for us. And you'll see the quote, huh, I've never thought of that before, and you might wonder what that means. Well, we were, during our interviews, asking, our final question would be to ask the female tourists, how do you think that the local women view you? And that was their response. They generally actually would pause and think about it a lot as though they had never thought about it before, and one of our participants indeed said that. So, as tourist majors and individuals who had to sort of do a lot of preparation to learn about how to be culturally sensitive in order to gain respect, during our research, we found this as definitely one of the most valuable findings. And very, like, we were actually very shocked the first time the tourists responded that way. We're like, anything? Like we know to think about that, but we didn't really realize that this is how they never thought about it. And then, so it is encouraging and inspiring to see so many women travel abroad, is how one local woman described seeing so many female tourists. And so, and not even just, like, it's really emphasizing that females would go out and travel. Some local women also shared that they felt hope and someday themselves would be able to have the freedom, time, and money to travel abroad as well.
So the third emerging theme, cultural customs, this kind of overlaps with behavior and attitudes as well, because you could see the emerging theme, cultural customs, through behavior and attitude. So I'm going to do my best to try to describe, but the two primary findings under this theme were dress code, what was appropriate, and communication. So what the local women often described to us about their perceptions about dress was how the female tourists dressed inappropriately to how they dress. They perceived it to be a little bit more overly sexual in perception because they are a little bit more reformed in their dress. So they often have their shoulders covered and their knees covered. So to see tourists with less clothing was a little offensive to them. So that was a major cultural identification or indicator there for one of the findings. And the second finding was communication. Ghanaians are very social in the respect that they love to interact with visitors. They want to be able to tell their stories. That's okay. They'll often ask about how your family is, how your brothers, your sisters, your marital status is. So they want to engage with you, and that is different culturally, especially to Western societies, where we'll be in public or social spaces and you're not interacting with every single person there. Often most people kind of do their own thing or a little bit more reserved. So that was an interesting finding because the local women were offended when they would call out to the female tourists and they wouldn't respond. And then on the other spectrum, the female tourists felt that the local women reaching out in that manner was abrasive. So they felt that they were just trying to lure them in to get them to buy dresses, to get them to buy souvenirs. It was just like that misconception. Which was interesting. So here we have an illustration of the findings, the mutual perception of both groups. So what we've done here is we've categorized how local women and female tourists perceive each other and what the majority, or I'm just going to read the title so it makes more sense, illustrates relative importance to each theme to local women versus female tourists. So we found local women definitely describe behavior as one of the more major and important perceptions when viewing female tourists. And then if you look at the female tourist perceptions, most of their responses were attitudes. So that's just something to kind of understand how the mutual gaze of both groups were.
So in conclusion, while travel to Busua continues to grow, it is valuable to better understand the positive and negative impacts that you will have on the locals and their culture as a traveler. And by exploring these impacts and how locals see tourists, it allows for travelers to become more educated and sensitive while preparing to immerse themselves into a new community.
And to wrap things up, we just wanted to talk about what our benefits or what our most rewarding aspects of doing the research were and the most challenging. It was really cool with the locals there, the benefits of kind of getting into the community, understanding what their perceptions were really meaningful to us. I just found, as a traveler, to understand what their culture was and to really kind of dig deep into how they see us was cool. But again, on the other side, it was challenging because our purpose was to understand how they felt about us. So asking them more intimate questions about what they disliked was challenging because they're telling it to the female tourist. So that was kind of the challenging aspect. But for the most part, they were really happy to be able to have that engagement and not just that surface level, that service or product kind of interaction.
And at the same time, like, being so well informed about what the culture is like and proper dress and how to sort of have respect in that type of situation. I feel like even though we are international tourists, we probably got to know them a lot deeper than any other tourist would, which is, to me and Jen, is also really valuable.
Thanks to this.
That's what we have.